For our midterm project, we chose to do an interactive art piece in which the user is going to draw flowers with geometric shaped leaves, and then our program will animate them. When we begin, Van Gogh runs you through a couple steps and directions. First, he explains the way that the petals work. He uses a pentagon and then a pentagon-shaped flower to demonstrate. With this, he's using a block that we made that draws flowers of all sorts of pentagons with all sorts of numbers of leaves of all sizes using this block. He then explains the different elements of the flower, including the petal shape, petal size, number of petals, and the color. He says that when you click him, you can change the element, and then he asks you to choose your first elements. First, we choose how many sides. We're going to go with 12. He asks how big. We're going to go with 14. And then he asks how many petals, and we're going to go with 5. Then he tells you to position the brush, and then it is explained that if you want to animate, you click the camcorder in the bottom left. When we move the brush and we paint the flower, it tells us that we have not chosen a color yet. Therefore, we choose violet, we paint it again. There's our flower. We now have all of the elements saved of that flower. And when we draw it, those elements are added to a list. The first element of each list corresponds to the first flower that is drawn. When we move it again, we choose a different color, and we draw it a second time, those elements are added a second time to those lists. This keeps track of all of the flowers that we have on the screen. That way, then when we animate, we are able to move the flowers around. The way that this happens is that an animate sprite is called, which takes each element from the list, draws each flower, so draws the first flower with these elements, then draws the second flower, then erases all of them, and changes the starting direction of the flower by a small index. When we want to erase all of the flowers, it also erases the list. When we choose a different element, they will reset these number petals, petal size, and petal shapes to whatever we choose this time. For example, a pentagon, size 10, with 7 sides. In this case, we're going to make it green, and we draw it again. We can also change the elements mid-drawing. Let's say another pentagon, size 20, with 8 sides. Choose a different color, reposition, and draw. Now when we animate, it will animate the separate flowers. It also gives the stems of the flowers. And then when we hit the pause button, it simply redraws each one on the list and then stops. The way that the color is working is that every time that you click a color, pen color 2 is set to a number, and then when you draw it, pen color 2 is added to a list of pen colors, which is yet another element that is on the list. The way that the stem works is that we save the direction that the sprite is faced in before it draws the flower every time, and then we add a certain degree of turn to that direction and redraw it so that the stem will always be facing down. The user is then free to play around with whatever flowers he or she desires. We can erase, move, redraw, choose different colors, draw again, choose different elements, draw again, animate. Some of the glitches that come into play with these more complicated flowers is that it is clearing pretty fast, so some of the other leaves aren't shown. This is our code. This is probably the most complex part of our code. This is where the movement takes place. When you press the pause button, you receive stop animating, and that stops all of the things and just redraws the last flowers that were recorded. And that's our project.